answer all the questions that we need when it comes to school issues and actually all sorts of legal issues. And they're famous because we take videos of them all the time and post them on our website. And we're always grateful because you guys really donate a lot of time and give back to the community, and we're grateful for that. So they have agreed to speak tonight and talk about this crazy COVID situation, go over some things and answer some questions. And I just want to thank you guys for being here. So Hope and Lori, take it away.
Sure, we love you guys. And for everyone out there, if you think we kid around, you know we do. It's our way of keeping sane because we're dealing with kids every day and parents every day who are struggling with their kids. And so we just try not to, well, we have to have some levity in it, but we know the seriousness of the situation. I was a special education teacher in New York City for 18 years. This is much easier being a lawyer than it was as a teacher. My sister has 2 sons, one of whom is on the spectrum. They're now 25, so she dealt with them, and he is actually, well, I'll talk about him because he's my nephew, but he is at ASU getting his teaching degree after years in public education where people didn't think he'd be able to do that. So we are firm believers in the public education system. Doesn't mean that we don't help parents get kids into private schools when the public education system is not able to meet their needs. So we're here tonight to talk about something that, you know, I was just sitting at my desk last week and I said, I never, not a year ago, not ever in my life, not in my, you know, going to become a teacher or going to law school, did I ever think I'd be in this situation that we all find ourselves in. My heart goes out to parents out there. My sister will tell you, if I ever let her speak, that she couldn't imagine having to have her kids at home and be a working mom. And I think you went to work to get away from your kids, right? Are they listening? Are they?
One is supposed to be on, so.
But we will talk to you about not how to not to do the remote learning, but what your rights are, because we are getting calls, bombarded with calls, and they're at all ends of the spectrum. You know, parents who want their children to go to school, and the school said, no, you know, we can't. And other parents who want their kids home, and the school says, well, our offer of FAPE is only if you come to school, not at the home. So, you know, trying to manage it, our goal tonight is just to tell you what the laws, rules, regulations are out there, helpfully, you know, to help you navigate it, so you at least know what you're kind of talking about with the school, and give you some tips. And I did say we're going to tell you what the laws are. There are no laws, by the way, when it comes to COVID, because when Congress wrote the Individuals with Disability Education Act in 1975, it was called something else in those days, the Education of All Handicapped Children Act. They never envisioned this pandemic. No one ever did. And so Congress is, they're kind of slow to act, so they're not rewriting the law. Our guidance is going to come from the Arizona Department of Education. So that's not the law, that's just guidance. That helps actually guide us, but it's not precedent. No one has to follow it. Just like we'll be talking about the executive orders that say you're supposed to wear a mask. And again, you're supposed to wear a mask outside, but there's no legal requirement about that. All right, so we're gonna move right along. And I already told you I have a background in teaching. My sister has a background as a parent. And we've been doing, we're litigation attorneys by trade. So Lori's practicing over 30 years, me over 25. God, that makes me so old, because I was a teacher for 18 years. And we've been doing just special education law for 15 years, which means we attend IEP meetings, we litigate, we file due process. So I just learned that we file more due process cases than anyone else. But we also resolve more than we even file. So that's really good. Okay. First slide. This is one of the best. No, not really. This is the disclaimer. So nothing we say here tonight is giving you legal advice, okay? We are not giving you legal advice. We might give you some tips, but we're not advising you on your particular situation. So what might apply to Mrs. Smith doesn't apply to Mrs. Jones, okay? So you do have to consult with an attorney before you do something that you think is, well, you don't have to consult with an attorney. Just, you know, bear in mind, we are not advising you on what to do in your situation. Okay, so don't come back to us and say you gave me the wrong advice. We're giving you tips in general. Okay. So let's just start with the background. Does your child have a right to an education? I mean, we have this pandemic. Do schools have to educate them? You know, why are they even bothering to try? So the Arizona Constitution actually says that the legislature shall provide a system of common schools by which a free school shall be established and maintained in every school district for students from 6 to 21 years. And in Arizona, it's to 22 if you have a student with an IEP who does not have all their credits. And tonight we're just going to talk about what's called the Individuals with Disability Education Act Part B. We're not really going to focus on the toddlers, those little guys 0 to 3 years old. But they do have rights as well. And we'll talk a little bit about 504 plans. So remember that students with disabilities, whether they have an IEP or a 504, are entitled to a free and appropriate public education, regardless of the pandemic. And we'll look at what that actually looks like. And when people say I have a constitutional right to an education, this is just a little legal background. It's not in the Constitution. It doesn't say everyone has a right to an education. It says you have a right to liberty and you have property interests. And there's case law that evolved over the years that basically says education is a property interest. So that is how it is a constitutional right. But again, it's not, if you go looking in the Constitution, the US Constitution, you're not going to see it. You will see it in the state constitutions. Arizona's state constitution is similar to other state constitutions. Okay. We've got to get that law in there because I really like it. All right. I will let Lori talk in a minute, believe it or not. Okay. So, the whole pandemic thing is balancing the right to an education and a free and appropriate public education of the students with disabilities against health and safety. So is your child entitled to an education? Yes, I just explained that. And it's a right recognized as well under disciplinary cases. So, and that has to do with due process. Sometimes you hear the phrase, oh, my kid is, you know, I want to have due process. What that means is before a school can expel a child from school, they have to give the child due process. They have to have a hearing. For students with disabilities, before you can get to a hearing, you have to have the manifestation determination review, whether you have an IEP or a 504, to see if the behavior is a manifestation of the disability. So again, students are entitled to due process. That means a hearing before they're excluded from school. If you have an IEP, by the way, you can't be expelled, just so you know. And if you're long-term suspended, you're entitled to all your IEP services. So that's how we get to the right to an education. And now we're balancing health and safety. And if you can see, the scales are pretty much even, you know, and that really is also a parental decision. You know, I'm going crazy, my kid's going crazy, it's not good for my kid's mental health, my kid is not learning by not being in school with a teacher, but hey, I also worry about his or her health and that of, you know, my family. I'm not going to answer that question for you. That is something I say to speak to your pediatrician about. Lori, you have something.
Advance your PowerPoint. Go to the next page. You were talking about the scale, but you weren't talking about the scale.
Oh, I'm one ahead. Thank you.
Now you're one behind.
I'm one behind. There's your scale.
There you go. That's what I'm here for.
All right. Okay. So I covered that already. So what's the law on COVID and students with disabilities, my little acronym? Well, there is none. But the good thing is there are also no waivers from Congress. That means that your child must be educated, must have the IEP implemented, although it's only to the greatest extent possible. The only thing that was held up with COVID in the spring was the initial RED meeting. So parents who were requesting for the first time that their child be evaluated for special education. A school has school district and charter schools, because charter schools are public schools. Charter schools and public schools have 15 school days to convene what's called a meeting to review existing data, what we call the RED meeting. So all of your children who have IEPs or who have been evaluated and denied and have a 504, you had the RED meeting. Some schools call it a pre-MET, some call it a MET1. MET stands for Multidisciplinary Education Team or Evaluation Team. So you had that meeting. So what happened was, if parents requested it, you know, in the middle of March, the school said, sorry, this only applies to school days. And when schools technically closed their physical doors, then the Arizona Department of Education issued a memo that said, this is not, schools are now closed, even though we're providing online and distance learning. So these are not school days, so you have to wait until schools open again. So everyone thought that was when the pandemic's over and the school doors open, but that's not true. Now there's new guidance that says once schools are open for distance learning, those schools, even if they never open their physical doors, those are school days. Evaluations were not supposed to be held up, but they were because people didn't know how to evaluate. FBAs were the only things probably that should have been impacted, because you really need to observe a child in the classroom setting. Now for FBAs, children are being observed in the home, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because hopefully one day soon they'll return to the classroom and that FBA will be kind of moot. So everything has to be in place. No IEP annual meetings have to be held. If a parent requests an IEP meeting, you know, the school has 45 school days. 45 school days, it used to be 2 weeks, and that changed in October 2017, 45 school days, which amounts to 2.5 months. So that's kind of crazy. We have our own secret ways of getting around that. But that really is only for, that rule was put into effect because there were parents who were requesting IEP meetings every couple of weeks, every few weeks. So that was for the serial requesters. Most schools will not wait that long. We do see occasionally where schools will say, we have, you know, pound on their chest, we have 45 school days. But that's when, you know, if you're nice and you say, look, this is really an emergency, I'm going to ask for it now. Or I just had a client who they're anticipating problems with the school. They don't have it now. So I had them actually ask the SPED director for a meeting for October, because they figure, why wait until September? Might as well ask for it. But all annual meetings have to be in time, evaluations, everything has to be complying with the same timelines as before. So there are no changes to the IDEA. That's good and bad. The reason, of course, like I said, is Congress writes the IDEA. We do follow what's called the federal regulations. Those are regulations that interpret the IDEA, or they implement them. Oh, this is getting really complicated, right, Lori? You're falling asleep.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wait.
So those are issued by the United States Department of Education. Let me just go back a second. So what we're finding now is guidance only, and we'll be talking about that. So what we're seeing is guidance from the Arizona Department of Education, guidance from the United States Department of Education, but everyone's kind of complying with it. I mean, they have no other guidance. The fact is that there's nothing from the top down. You have Governor Ducey issuing executive orders. Again, that's guidance, that's not the law. The superintendent of public instruction is Kathy Hoffman, and she's telling districts, you could do what you need to do individually. So again, there's no guidance there's some guidance, but they're leaving it to the districts. Open or close, that's up to you based on some guidance by the Arizona Department of Health Services. So there's no comprehensive approach. We're kind of, we're all learning this together. School districts, a lot of them I know are doing the best they can. As an example, and some of you may like it or not, Deer Valley Unified School District, who we've had a number of cases against in the past, they've been holding webinars for parents. They even had us speak. They had their attorney speak. So they've been trying to reach out. Again, no one has all the answers, but we're also finding that communication is really the biggest thing. And we know there are some districts who are doing such a poor job of that, that parents are calling us, and they shouldn't have to do that. So it's left to the individual school districts and charter schools. Lori's going to talk soon. One more slide, Lori. So the resources that we look at are and this is just in alphabetical order. So it's not based on what's more important. The American Academy of Pediatrics, and you heard in the news several weeks ago, they're the ones who said, hey, get these kids back to school because their mental health is more important than their physical safety, is basically what they were saying. The Arizona Department of Education issues guidance. I'm going to give you links to that. It's overwhelming how much they're doing and how busy they are. I speak regularly with the Arizona Department of Education Exceptional Student Services, and they are constantly meeting, and also speaking with special education directors to answer their questions. And we have guidance from the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, Governor Ducey's executive orders, and the United States Department of Education, including the Office of Civil Rights. So just a couple of things you should know. So the executive order is what you hear about. Governor Ducey has, new executive orders. It's signed, it's written, it's a published directive, or it's a policy. Much like the president also issues executive orders. Those are to trigger emergency powers, but they're not law. They don't have the force and effect of law. So if you don't follow them, you can't be arrested, although we have been hearing about people being arrested, but it's not, you don't have to follow them. And the legislature can't overturn the executive orders. The purpose is really to persuade or encourage people to do what they say. Wear a mask, please wear a mask in public. Okay, two more. Lori, you're up.
Okay, so your options, which actually also depend on the options being offered by the schools. There are basically three, and they can be combined. The first one is in-person instruction for those schools that are open and offering live in-person instruction, meaning your child goes to school with other students, and if social distancing cannot be maintained, they have to wear masks. That can change during the day. Sometimes they will wear them, if they won't wear them. There'll be a teacher, and all the services are provided in school. That's one option, and some parents had to pick. Some schools made them decide whether it's going to be for the entire school year. Some are deciding week by week. Some made parents decide by semester or even quarter. But that's one of the options. That's going back to school physically with precautions, which we'll discuss a little later. I'm going to skip the middle one for the on-site learning right now and go back to it. But the third one on the screen is distance learning. And that can be done in a variety of ways, and we'll talk about that as well. In this picture, you see a child on a computer, which is the one that most people think of. But there are other ways to do distance learning, and again, we'll cover that in a little bit. The third option is the on-site learning opportunities. And this is actually a picture of one of the schools. Let me see, it was Coronado High School on the 17th. I don't think anyone showed up for that. But what this option is when schools are not offering the in-person instruction so that children can only distance learn. They have to also offer on-site learning opportunities. Can be as synonymous as babysitting. Some schools, some districts, and I won't mention which ones, some are doing a little bit better job. They're offering some help in those labs. But basically it's for parents that work, cannot be home, or children that need to get to a safe environment during the day. Or if parents just elect to put their child there, but usually it's because they cannot give them the home learning that other parents can. It's also a safe place. It's supervised. Some of the on-site learnings also offer breakfast or lunch. Sometimes it's paid, sometimes it's free, but so there are services that are provided that a child at home can't get. It also gives some people opportunities to observe children to make sure that they're not being neglected or harmed in any way. So those are the options, and again, they can be a hybrid of them. There are some districts that are offering, you could do in-person or distance learning, and sometimes you can even change off day to day or week to week, or especially if it is I knew I was going to have trouble with this word. Synchronous. Synchronous? Is that right?
Synchronous.
Synchronous. Synchronous. I knew it. I just knew it. Anyway, if it's synchronous, so the teacher is teaching live, perhaps to a classroom, and is on Zoom to the students at home. Then the next day, if the child goes to school, they could just pick up where they were, and vice versa if the child is learning from home. Next slide, Hope, please. Terminology. Some of these overlap. So you're going to hear them. It's important for you to know exactly what it is being offered, which of these are being offered to your child. And again, they can overlap. So online, you think about online instruction, it's a very broad term. Even before COVID, there were a lot of online instruction. There are students that could actually get either taped or synchronous, or whatever that word is, at the same time, and being taught, or they could have videos or pre-recorded videos that they are doing online. There's virtual, that's what we were talking about basically with Zoom or the WebEx, where the teacher is actually teaching. It could be one-on-one, it could be to a whole classroom. Remote may also be in either of the first two, online or virtual, but it could also be telephonic, especially for students that have visual deficiencies and they don't, video is not going to be helpful. They could be doing it telephonic. It does not necessarily mean online or by computer. It also can be packages that are sent home from the school for students to work on at home and then sent back for grading and review. Distance learning, same thing as some of these others. They are done where the child is not present in school. So the teaching and services can be provided at home or via electronics. And digital is another word that could be used. And then there's the blended and hybrid, which I was talking about early, where you could be learning one day from home, and then the next day or week or month or semester, you could be going into school. Or you could go to school part of the day or part of the week in person, and then the other days you could be learning at home virtually or remotely. Okay, but all of this terminology, all of these things are so that every student, all students, regardless of any disabilities, have access to curriculum. Next slide, please, Hope. often people get these terms mixed up. Oh, go back. There you go. Homebound, home instruction, homeschool. They all sound very familiar, and people often will use that. Parents will call and say, "Why can't my child be homebound or get home instruction, homeschool?" They are very different, and I want to go over what they are. Homebound is for any student. They do not have to have an IEP or a 504, regardless if they have a disability that impedes their learning. If they have some medical condition that prohibits them from going to school for at least 3 months, or so intermittently throughout the school year that they could get a doctor's certification, has to have a doctor's certification that is provided. And the interesting thing about homebound is the decision of whether or not a child can be homebound is made by the administration. Again, because the child does not have to have an IEP or a 504, there are no teams involved. It's clearly the medical certifications handed in, and then the administration makes the decision if the child can be homebound. Services, school, education, you're only going to receive the core curriculum and up to 4 hours a week. For most cases, there are some schools that will give more than 4 hours, but that is generally the rule, that it's 4 hours a week for curriculum. Home instruction is for a child with an IEP. So that is if a child, and this is the most restrictive on the continuum of restrictions. So it is very difficult to get the home instruction, but an IEP team can decide that a child should be taught at home. And again, that might be someone coming to the home, or it could be virtual. In the case right now with COVID, it probably is. And the level of service, or LOS, is H, and that is the most restrictive placement, again, made by an IEP team. Homeschooling, and this one parents get mixed up with a lot. You know, I'll just homeschool my child. They have to realize if you're going to homeschool, that's fine. You have to cut ties. You're cutting ties with the school. The school is not going to be responsible for anything. You can't homeschool and then also want to send them to school at the same time. They're not entitled to services from the school. Everything, you're just completely cutting ties from the school. Same thing as if you're getting an ESA scholarship. You're cutting ties with the school, even if you're not providing homeschool, which is one of the things you can use the ESA money for. And then the parent or guardian is responsible for providing instruction and letting the Department of Education know that the child is being homeschooled. Okay, I'll let you talk again, Hope, because I'm sure you're just.
I was talking, I just muted myself, that's all. Okay, so a word about technology. So some parents and some families have internet capability. They have fast speed, but you know, it's slowed, of course, because you know, it depends on how many people are using it in not just your home but in your neighborhood, and it costs money to upgrade, and not everyone has one computer for each child. So there are definitely disadvantages, definitely disparities. And so you need that device, you need something, you need a computer. So who's negatively impacted? You know, it's going to be people who are more economically and financially distressed than others. So it really is disproportionate. So we're not just seeing it among students with disabilities, but you're seeing it amongst socioeconomic classes. And that is why the one thing that I did like about the last executive order was that ability to go to a location. Doesn't have to, it's not necessarily the child's homeschool, but that location where there are computers, where there is technology for students who don't have it at home. And then one of the biggest things we saw in the spring was the inconsistency or lack of consistency among teachers. So we might know a family of 4 kids, and 2 have IEPs, 2 do not. The 2 without IEPs, the gen ed, the typical kids, they were fine. Their teachers were great. One kid with disabilities, his teacher was fine, and one kid with an IEP, his teacher just didn't know how to use it, and so the teachers weren't trained. Over the summer, the AD worked with school districts to make sure that all the teachers had the training, but I imagine that there are still people who don't and who are not comfortable with this technology medium. So that's another problem that we saw with the technology. Okay, so initially the CDC issued guiding principles for schools to keep in mind. They were looking at 3 categories. The more people a student or staff member interact with, and the longer the interaction, well, the higher the risk of COVID spread. And so we know that the risk of COVID spreads in school settings, like in the population, as follows. The lowest risk are going to be for students and teachers who engage in virtual only classes, activities, and events. More risk is going to be at school, small in-person classes, activities, and events. But you can keep it on the lower end if the kids stay together with the same teacher throughout the school day and the groups don't mix. That doesn't really work well for high school, of course. And they should be at least 6 feet apart and not share objects. Well, that's really great, but that's what kindergartners do. That's what, everyone does, right? Doesn't even have, not even elementary, everyone shares. And also that you stagger or rotate schedules. Some kids come in Monday, Tuesday, others come in Wednesday, Thursday. You come in morning or afternoon. So some schools have adopted a hybrid model like that, a virtual and in-person class structures, as Laurie is talking about, staggered or rotated schedules to keep kids apart, smaller class sizes. Of course, the highest risk is going to be those going back to school as if nothing happened. There's no spacing. They're sharing a classroom. They're sharing materials. And there's no, it's the same as it was before. Okay, so then we also had, when I first prepared this presentation, I was really trying to go in chronological order of what was coming out of the news, when it was coming out. So then remember the American Academy of Pediatrics came out June 25th, and they issued this interim guidance on the school reentry for this coming year, saying that when kids are in school, all policy considerations for the school year should start with the goal of having students physically present in school. Unless the local public mandates, and that would be here, the Arizona Department of Health Services, mandates that it's just not safe, or because of an individual student's unique needs. So the American Academy of Pediatrics said, learning at home is not as effective as learning in a school and will lead to learning gaps. Socialization will be impaired. There's the mental and emotional health, and the risks of effects of isolation, which we all know, but of course this is magnified for kids. This is magnified for kids with disabilities. And so those are, that's why you're here. Those are the kids who are impacted the most. Okay, so then the Arizona Department of Education has, their website is amazing. If you have 24 hours in a day and no kids at home to take care of, you could really educate yourself. So there is a wealth of information out there. It's just accessing it. It's having the time to do that. But they have these things called hot topics. And this was one of them. This issued July 23rd, 2020. And that talked about the CDC releasing new resources and tools for opening schools. So Dr. Robert Redfield, you've seen him on the news. He's a CDC director, and he said that it's critically important for our public health to open schools in the fall. And so they issued the statement on the importance of reopening America's schools in the fall, and they issued new science-based, has to be science-based resources and tools for school administrators, teachers, parents, guardians, and caregivers. And it talked about, again, the importance of education, instruction, and social emotional development. And they say that there is low risk and low transmission among children. So I'm not going to get into that. I'm not a scientist. But children are not immune. Yes, there is a lower risk, but they're not immune. And of course, they could be carriers. Okay, so then we have the...
Me, it's me.
Oh, that's you? That's you? Okay, go.
So this is just a partial list. It is not an exhaustive list of Department of Education guidance, the Arizona Department of Education guidance. And
U.S.
I'm sorry, U.S. I knew that. I was waiting to see if you're paying attention. U.S. Department of Education. And basically, these are things that you should probably bookmark so you could look at them if you need to look something up in these times. The last two are really the most interesting, I think, of the supplemental fact sheet addressing serving children with disabilities during COVID-19. That was came out March 21st, and question and answers on providing services to children with disabilities during COVID-19 outbreak. A lot of the questions that we get can be found, the questions and answers can be found on those things. Again, not an exhaustive list, but this is ones that we think are most interesting. And just keep in mind that I think there's been no waivers to do anything. So especially like child find, schools are still responsible for finding, identifying, and evaluating students that are suspected of having a disability. And they still only have 45 days to do that. Now, as always, there are two exceptions. One obviously is the same, regardless of COVID. If the school asks for consent to evaluate and they don't get it, they don't have to do it, and they certainly don't have to do it within the 45 days. The second one might be more applicable to COVID-19, which is if the child or parent are not available to complete the screening. Now, a lot of times these screenings or evaluations even can be done virtually, but there are times they can. I would agree that functional behavior assessment can't be really done because the child is not in the atmosphere or the school or at recess or lunch with other students. So it's hard to assess a child for functional behavior. But for the most part, a lot of things can be done even remotely. But if a parent isn't going to make the child available or it can't be done, then they would have an extension of time. But you have to complete the activities, the assessment, the evaluations as soon as possible after the exception is over. And 45-day timeline cannot be extended for all children, like by the state. They can't say, well, we are not going to have that requirement. That has not been done. So we still have child find, we still have evaluations, we still have METs, we still have IEPs. They don't have to be done in person. They can be done virtually, they can be telephonic. So lots of ways to get it done, and schools are not going to be let off the hook for not getting it done. I will also tell you that I understand with one of my cases that the Office of Civil Rights is not excusing evaluations not being done within the 60 days of the time that they get consent. So anyway, next slide, please, Hope. Okay, also, these are some points from the United States Department of Education that all timelines have to be met. It's just what I was talking about. All students with disabilities have to be provided FAPE in accordance with their IEPs and or 504 plans to the maximum extent possible. They're supposed to have equal access to the same opportunities. So those online or distance learning, they have to be made available to all students. And like I said, they have to be accommodations and services and service minutes are supposed to be provided to the greatest extent possible. sometimes they're not going to be able to, and that's just the truth of it. And they weren't when the COVID outbreak started. So what we are going to have are comp services, and they are not going to be just general, and they're not going to be minute for minute, but we have been telling parents to keep track so that if a child is supposed to have 30 minutes of OT a week and they don't because the OT couldn't connect on the computer to do it, or for whatever reason, just keep a list of that. Again, at some point, and there's not going to be a time period for this, no one's said 30 days, 60 days, they have to make a determination. But at some point, they will have to make a determination on an individualized basis. They're going to have to evaluate the child and see if comp services are necessary, and they will be provided. And again, you might not need all of them. You might need every minute of them. And also the child, not only the comp services, but if they've fallen so greatly behind, they might be entitled to additional services. Homebound services, if they're needed, sick or high risk. There are students that are getting doctor's notes that even if schools are open, they're not going to be able to attend because of immune issues. Consider distance learning plans as contingencies in IEPs, so that if things can't be done that are in an IEP, because even to the greatest extent possible, they can't, then maybe we need a distance learning plan. We'll look at one of those in a little bit. Clarify what kind of distance learning there will be, and so much it can be thought of outside the box. Again, you can do things by phone, you can do things remotely, you can do things by email that you may not have thought of doing before. And providing effective alternative access where technology is a barrier. We have to look to see what's accessible to some people with different disabilities, like people that, students that are blind or deaf or even hard of hearing. We have to look for different ways to allow them to access the curriculum just like their peers, their regular peers. You can use things, these are just some examples, speech recognition software, or eye tracking. There are students that have no mobility. So if they're working on a computer, they don't have a way to use the mouse. So there are eye tracking mobility methods. There are mouth sticks. Students that are blind can get screen reader software. So there are a lot of things, and it's responsibility of the school, the IEP team, 504 team, to make sure that everybody has that access.
I'm going to throw you a question.
Okay.
Can a school say to a parent, you know what, we just can't educate your kid. We just don't have the resources here. We're a small charter school, and you know what, you need to go back to your home school district.
Don't know where you got that question from one of our inquiries today. No, they cannot do that. We know of one that did do it. No, they are still responsible for providing a FAPE to the maximum extent possible. If they can't provide it, then they are responsible for finding a place. Maybe if it's private day school, they will have to pay for and transport that student to so that they can access curriculum. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't go into how long that whole process takes, but schools need to be told that in cases like that, they are discriminating against the child. That is
absolutely. And, you know, hopefully it's just a matter of them not knowing better, and a phone call from a good attorney might make them realize that they have erred, and they will fix that. If not, there are other ways to do it, but unfortunately the child then may be without education for some time.
And a parent should try it before contacting, you know, try it first. So, you know, you've done everything before you know, having an attorney do it, but, you know, okay, next.
Next, so one of the items in the United States Department of Education are these fact sheets, and Office of Civil Rights. We're going to touch on that. Now, again, IDEA and IEPs are for students to make sure that they're being educated fairly and getting access to education. Office of Civil Rights looks more at discrimination. So what Office of Civil Rights has been concerned with the COVID-19 is that while we're trying to make sure everybody's safe, we want to also avoid discrimination and make sure that everybody is still given what their due is, even if we have to do it in an alternative method, such as virtual meetings, evaluations. I covered that earlier. There's a fact sheet that talks about the way to not discriminate. You want compliance with CDC recommendations, but it should not create civil rights violations. And to ensure that all students are able to learn and study in an environment that is free from discrimination. Teachers should be careful, for example, that if they're asking students where they travel to, they make sure that they're not asking students of a particular race, where it is that they went on vacation without making it general to the whole class, because it could look discriminatory. If a school district—
Hey, Lori.
Yes.
Lori, this is Laura Henry. I actually was told, it was interesting today on an ASU training that I would probably share with you guys. It was awesome resources. They actually told us that we should ask students when they were traveling, because there's an IP, I guess, IP checks for cheating and that type thing. So they're trying to have students stop, like maybe they had their friend in a different state or country taking their test for them. So they're actually encouraging the students to tell the teachers if they're traveling somewhere.
Well, then they better ask everybody where everybody's going. That's the point, that you shouldn't be asking maybe
just certain people. Okay.
Right.
So basically, if you did your survey at the beginning of class, at the beginning of your time period, that
yes,
okay,
you don't want to discriminate, so you don't want to just ask certain students that might be going to places that are more concerning.
I feel you.
Laura, that has to do with cheating, right?
Yes, academic integrity. You can't say cheating.
So we do, part of our practice is representing higher ed students. We do a lot of academic integrity, and they would be taking a test and speaking to a tutor who might be in another country halfway around the world.
Right. Yeah. So, but anyway, there was a really good, robust conversation about that.
Wow.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you for sharing that.
We're getting questions too, but okay.
So if a school district closes its schools and doesn't provide any education services to general ed students, then the school is not obligated to provide education to students with disabilities. And that's really important because when schools first closed, until they reopened online, students with disability parents were calling and saying, well, my child should still get educated. If none of the general population is getting it, your child's not entitled to it either. So just something to keep in mind if schools do close again. Let's see. Keep in mind that Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS, is available to give guidance and help with getting students services, thinking through problems in the time of COVID. I think we go to the next slide, or do you want to take a question?
I have a great question here, but oh man, I'm just going to try to get through this because this is unbelievable. Okay. But because I think we're kind of at the end, but where I could go through this quickly. So these are the executive orders. Governor Ducey issued 3 that really relate to schools, the most recent being Open for Learning, and that was on July 23, 2020. And everyone probably knows about this, but it says you can return to the physical school. It's up to the local school district whether to open, and that delayed the in-person to August 17th. Distance learning can be in real time, so teachers can actually, rather than recording it, they're actually teaching like we are talking to you now. When there is for kids who, for schools that were not open, they have to have free on-site learning. That's the, babysitting model, as I'll call it. I'll probably get a lot of flack for that, but we'll see if I'm right. And notification has to be sent to all parents and guardians about what's available. What's interesting is that can be on the website, but the notification must be direct contact to parents of students with disabilities, parents of students who are English language learners, kids in DCS and foster care. So what that actually looks like to me, it would be like a personal email, but it's probably more like an email blast. And of course, wearing face coverings, masks and face coverings, and social distancing for students 5 years old and up. Lots of our questions are, my kid can't wear a mask. All right, well, let me get on my high horse now. I'm not a parent, but I will tell you, I have friends who have kids who are on the autism spectrum, who are on the lower end, and they are wearing masks. Why? Because mom is wearing a mask, because they make a game out of it. All right, it's much easier for me to look at what they have, the end product. They worked all summer to do that. That's not a reason not to wear it. So you have to get your kid to try to do it. And I hear about games, who can wear their mask long enough at home. If your child has a medical disability, a medical reason, get that note from your doctor. Don't go calling me and saying, Hope, my kid from a couple of years ago, he can't wear a mask. I can't do anything about that, okay? Get that mask, get him to wear a mask, or don't send him to school, but you can't have it both ways, all right? So I'm sorry if I'm gonna yell at you, but I will, okay? So I once had a client say to me, you're not nice to me. You're not paying me to be nice to you. And you're not paying me to agree with you. But, I'll tell you what you can and what you can't do. Okay, so, good thing I wasn't a mother, right? So, so that's the Open for Learning plan that I just spoke about. And this is what schools had to submit if they want to do distance learning. So everyone has something that looks like that. Kind of boring, but they had to submit that. Getting through the end of these quickly. These are things to bookmark. This is where you have a whole host of information. You're going to bookmark it, on your, I'll send you these, just email us and I'll send you a PDF of the PowerPoint. And so you'll just bookmark this.
Thank you, Hope.
And then you'll see, we go on every day. Every day we go on to see this stuff. August 14th, a lot of stuff came out. Well, that's what the metrics that came out. Here are the metrics. So, just go to, okay. Yeah, so what Governor Ducey says is, let's see what the Arizona Department of Health Services says. And based on that, we'll determine if schools can open or not. So this is what it looks like. This is the first of I don't know how many pages was in this booklet. But this tells you what the metrics are. And what do metrics mean? Like data, like you go to an IEP meeting. Let me see the data. Let me see the data. What does that mean? It's just numbers and stuff. But basically, just to give you an example. Schools are supposed to open. Now, this is guidance. They don't have to. They can open tomorrow, okay, even if COVID cases are going up. But what they're recommending is that there's a 2-week decline in the number of cases, or 2 weeks with new cases of rates below 100 per 100,000 for your county. So Maricopa County, just to give you an example, as of August 19th, I'm sorry, I didn't look it up today, as of yesterday, Maricopa County had 2,985 cases, that's 3,000 cases per 100,000 population. Now, I haven't done the math in a while, but that sounds like a lot. That's like 3,000 versus 100. So what is that, 30 times, 300 times, something like that, right? So instead of 3,000 now, and we have to get to 100, okay, for 2 weeks. Or, 2 weeks with less than 7% positivity. So that's when schools are supposed to open. Now, some schools are opening, but they have precautions. Okay. The next, this is very important, this one. This is what I think school would look like. Okay? I taught kids with emotional disabilities. This would have been my class. They would love the mess because that would be just so much fun. Okay, so basically that's what I foresee. Oh, look at the kid under the table. I didn't even see him. All right, so here are some questions, but I'll answer the question that came in. Do we know of a SPED-friendly charter school in Gilbert? No. Some schools are a little better than others, and it depends on the school. For instance, I don't want to say any names, but like there's one large school here, and one of the school that's closest to us in Scottsdale, I think is really good. I don't say great, I think it's really good. But that same school charter has another one on the west side that's awful. So it really depends on the school. Depends on the teachers. It really all boils down to the teachers. Okay. Okay, so this parent has been told that the charter told her that they don't have to accept kids with behaviors or self-regulation issues because most are teaching above grade level, and she was told directly by a few charters that special education kids will fall behind rather quickly and might not be the right fit and would have to move them on. That is an accurate statement. That is an accurate statement that they will fall behind because they're not receiving the services, because they want to focus on the kids who are higher functioning. They want to keep those numbers up. They want to get that A grade level. They must accommodate your child. Not just accommodate, they must implement the IEP. Now, all that said, a school can't tell you that. I can tell you that. One of our first questions would be, why don't you want to go to your local public school district? In Gilbert, I think Gilbert public schools are really good for the most part. So I have seen a lot of great work there. That's what we would say. But yes, the charter school must implement the IEP. But you have to think, what do I want for my kid? And that's what you have to look at. Sometimes you want your child who has an IEP in the charter school because their older brother, who's a typical kid, is in that charter school. So think of what you want for your kid. Yes, they have to accommodate your child. They cannot say that. You can file an OCR, complaint on that. Easy peasy. You go on Google how to file an Office of Civil Rights complaint with the United States Department of Education. But you have to tell the Office of Civil Rights, what do you want? I don't want this said to me. I want training. I want my kid to be accepted. And also on charter schools, make sure, remember, there's an application and enrollment. So application is you're applying to the school. They can't ask you anything on that about whether your kid has an IEP. On the enrollment form, they can. If they do it on the initial form, the application, that is discriminatory. Okay, they must accept your child regardless of the IEP. All right, open enrollment is different.
Hope, just to follow up on your answer, is there ever a time where you're just being pragmatic and it's like not worth fighting a school to make a change like that? Or do you think it's always worth the fight?
I might have spoken to your group. This might have been like a question from 10 years ago, but I remember this. Parent says, my kid is a level of service C, self-contained, and I'm putting them in a charter school. And the charter school doesn't have a self-contained class. What are my rights? Do they have to create one? And I said, yes, they do. But then your kid is going to be the only one in that class. Is that really what you want? So you have to think of pragmatics. Don't stand on principle for your kid. If you can get your kid a appropriate education, as good an education as you can at the local school district, then do it. If you're living in Gilbert, take advantage of that, okay? If you're living somewhere else, maybe looking at charter school makes sense. Amy Silverman wrote an article many years ago for the Phoenix New Times, maybe it was 10 years ago, about her daughter Sophie. I mean, she talks about it all the time. So Google Amy Silverman, and she also wrote The Girl in the Little Red Dress, or the little, whatever. And she has a blog, but she went to a charter school with Sophie, who has Down syndrome, and she said, I want to enroll my child here. And the director said, you know, that's fine, but really it's not great. You know, it's great for your other kid, but it wouldn't be a good fit. And so what she did was she said, I'm not going to fight this. I'm going to put my kid in the public school, and it was fine. So, you know, pick and choose your battles. We can say it to you, practically speaking. Why do you want to do that? The school is not allowed to do that, though. Now, if you want to affect change, but that's a whole different conversation. Legally,
right, we all have limited, you know, time, energy, emotional capacity, you know.
And the fact is that charter schools do have limited resources. They still have to provide what your child is entitled to, but just the economy of scale. There are more teachers, more SPED teachers in a district school. There are more computers. There are more Orton Gillingham programs. There's more of what they need in a public school. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
I'm not a fan of charter schools. Unless your kid is just absolutely brilliant and has no disabilities, it's perfect. Okay? Can families that are out, let me make sure I answer the other one, most are teaching, yeah, they do teach hard, yeah. Can families that are out of boundary be told that schools do not have to accept IEP kids? Yes. Yes. What they do is they can say, because they have limited resources. So if you live in the district, you could go back yesterday. But if you have an IEP, they just may not have room. Now, how do you know if they have room or not? You'd have to do a public records request to see how many kids are there. So, can families, let's say, do that? They claim they are full and can't accept any more IEPs. Yeah, I mean, again, the only way to do it is to do a public records request. I want to see how many kids have IEPs, how much do you have capacity for, and that's it. Let's see. Okay, hi Ellen. Notifications about Open for Learning, my district. Oh, I shouldn't have said your name, okay. Did not send communication to parents. I'm surprised that DVUSD did not send the Open for Learning app locations. Write to Melissa McCusker, the SPED director. Tell her I told you to write to her directly. Contact the Exceptional Student Services there and ask about that. Just write to her directly and just say, you called me and I told you to write to her, okay? Next.
But do you see that question from Betsy Norris? Does AZ have a timeline for holding an IEP meeting after a parent requests it? Not an eval, just an IEP.
Yeah, 45 school days. 45 school days. Yeah. But what I would tell a parent is if you have a real reason for it, you know, and like you concerned, then number one, say, you know, can we meet? Say, I will even waive a meeting of the full IEP team. Maybe it's something that can be resolved with the SPED director or the SPED coordinator. Maybe you don't need a full team meeting because it is a crazy time now to get meetings going. On the other hand, it's easy because you're doing it by Zoom. But
do you see this one? My kindergartner is having an issue with remote learning. Can you require the district to provide in person?
Nope.
No, not unless they're providing it for general ed kids.
It becomes a COVID issue as well, a safety issue.
If they do not have to send somebody to your house, we get that question a lot. Can they send a parapro to my house? No, they do not have to do that. It is a
and the other thing is, you know, DDD has basically said publicly that you cannot use HAB or respite providers during school hours to provide habilitation while they're in school. So that's not an option either.
Right, and a lot of services can be done remotely. If they can't be, then you keep track of it, and that would probably become compensatory later on.
There is a compensatory fund set up at the AGE, so just keep track. I understand that, well, I'm told by school districts that they are already contacting parents. I don't know from parents if that's true or not, that they're contacting parents to talk about it. For instance, I have an attorney I'm talking to, and I said, you better get me that offer by September. Otherwise, I'm filing because the kid didn't have anything. And I was told, oh no, the teacher has a log. I said, let me see the log. That was, yeah, that was several weeks ago. Here's a long one. Let me see, 7th grade daughter with IEP goals far below grade level, placed her in 7th grade curriculum for distance learning. No changes to placement per principal. Case manager called. No, that's not true. Call an IEP meeting, call an emergency IEP meeting. If you don't have, contact Arizona Department of Education, file a state complaint. They have to resolve that within, I think it's 45 days. Sometimes, we could get involved, but you're paying for us to do that. So I would say to file. We have a meeting next Tuesday morning. How do we get them to slow down on her online classrooms? Saying she can't do it. The law says you have to, you're going to say the law says you have to implement her IEP to the greatest extent possible. Greatest extent possible. How is this a FAPE? You have to provide a FAPE. You can't just throw her in with everyone else and not provide the modifications. The only time a school can do that is if the parent says, I want my kid at home, and the school says, we can't provide FAPE at home. He has to come here. Okay, so that's their offer of FAPE. But record your meeting. You don't have to tell them you're taping it. I do like when parents say, I am tape recording the meeting. It's just more honest. You could say it's overwhelming. I don't want to have to take notes. You could tape record the meeting. And just have them explain everything and say, put it in a prior written notice. Please note all of my questions and my objections, put in a prior written notice. Next, my kindergarten is having an issue with remote learning. Now that I answered that one.
So I think we answered all the questions. Does anybody else have questions? And also, before you all go, don't get off yet, because I'm gonna have Hope pick a number between 4 and 16, and that person is winning something. Let me tell you what you're winning. I should know this, but is winning a $15 Amazon gift card. So I don't know how we're supposed to know. Are you all numbered? Maybe that's what, right. So I think you're all numbered. So Hope, do you want to pick a number for me really fast?
4 and 17, you said?
Yeah.
Well, I feel bad for the people at the outset because normally it would be between 4 and 17, so I'll just say 17.
Okay, so that is Tracy. Tracy is the winner.
And this is recorded, Tracy, so no one can cheat you now.
Yeah. So Tracy, in the chat group, can you please give me your email so we have a way to send it to you? And just to let everybody know that at every online meeting now, we're going to do a raffle at the end of the meeting just to encourage people to attend and get all the great information. So, okay, I got it, Tracy, thank you. And then I just want to open it back up. Who has any more questions for Hope? And if you don't, I always have some.
Well, also there are tips for parents, so just take this, yeah. All right.
Can we ask a question through voice?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, hi, sorry, I just couldn't easily type. Question, and if this is outside the scope of this meeting, feel free to let me know. If the parent has a disability and the child does incidentally have an IEP, but if the parent has a disability, what are the laws around accessibility for the parents to either the public school curriculum, or my child is actually on an empowerment scholarship, and that the entire ADE, the Department of Education portal system, isn't accessible, and they're moving to a system that hasn't been tested for accessibility. And I'm finding that people know something about IDEA laws and know very little about how the ADA applies within education. Do you have any experience with that, or is there any laws that help in that case?
Well, so websites must be accessible. You know that? So, but you're asking, I'm hearing two different questions. So your kid has ESA? You have ESA?
Yes, yes. My daughter has ESA,
No,
and
right.
I'm finding that a lot of the ESA portals and information for parents, the parent websites are not accessible. No matter who I advocate with, they don't seem to have a plan for making them accessible.
So the Arizona Department of Education is not responsible for that at all. So you would have to go through whoever has that portal, whoever so you're paying for these digital services, right? For these online services.
No. This is the things like the help desk. When you have a question about your ESA account for your child and you want to ask somebody at the Department of Ed, they use a help desk that is not accessible. Their contract signature process is not accessible. Their new class wallet system that they're going to be using for managing expense reports may or may not be accessible. They can't seem to answer that question for me. I haven't moved over yet, but everyone's supposed to be moved over soon.
Contact the Office of Civil Rights.
I'm sorry, the what?
Not the Arizona. The Office of Civil Rights, United States Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. That is
okay.
They will take care of it. They will, because there was an advocate, a non-attorney advocate in this state who filed a whole bunch of complaints. Cynthia, you know who that is, against charter schools, I think BASIS, and for non-accessibility for websites. And a lot of schools have had that issue too. Contact the Office of Civil Rights, just file a complaint.
Okay, thank you.
On a side note, Hope, I don't know if it would be for this issue, but Arizona disability law has been really helpful lately to families who are having ADA issues. And they'll walk you through the process, and they'll even offer to mediate some of that too. I don't know if it would apply to this, but that's just another resource.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I love, having people call there. They get a little busy with stuff, but just call and ask for Amanda Glass. Don't tell her Hope told you to call. And yeah, just ask her. And if not, they may refer you to Raising Special Kids but at ACDL, if they take it on, they look for cases that have kind of like policy issues inside them, that have applicability to greater issues, not just.
Okay, we have one last question, and then we're going to have to go. Our IEP is in 30 days. Any sample DLPs available?
What's a GLP?
DLP.
Well, no, the DLP was for the school districts to submit to ADE. So what you're looking at is what it would look like. That is where you may want to contact an advocate, a non-attorney advocate for that, but I would say go online. I don't know that there's a wealth of information online. Just type it in, even from other states.
Okay, so we're at 7:57, and we want to honor everybody's time, and the meeting ends at 8. So I want to take a moment and just really thank Lori and Hope for giving us their time tonight and sharing their wisdom with us, and always being accessible to help families. And just, we're really grateful that you're always willing to step up to the plate. And I am especially grateful that you're always willing to let me videotape you. So I super appreciate that. And we definitely want to have you on a regular basis because there's so many questions. So thank you very much. I'm going to give you a big clap. Thank
1 minute.
you.
Laura, I didn't get to answer your question, so just email it to me, cut and paste it into an email, Laura.